So I'd like to start this episode with a moment of honesty. Not that I'm not always honest when I'm on the episode, but I figured why not start it with that statement? Sounds really good. Anyway, um, I'm having a fucking rough morning. I'm just kind of frustrated, a little pissed off, a little tense. Um, it's so funny how it can start with like one thing in one part of your life and then something else in another part of your life and then something else in another part of your life and just one thing after another. You just don't accept it. You're just like, man, how is that happening? But you get agitated, start getting a little pissed off, and for me, when that happens, I tend to get a little bit more. I guess I go internal. I get very quiet and I start to really just kind of let things spin inside. But what's funny about it is that at one point, that used to just fucking take over my morning. Like I'd be just fucking. I wouldn't be enjoying my coffee. I wouldn't be enjoying the walk. I wouldn't be enjoying anything. But in that state, I'd be thinking about all the shit that I'm kind of frustrated about. So there's an element of self reflection that happens during the course of being frustrated and pissed off about everything. See, that's the funny thing. It's not being frustrated and pissed off about any one thing. It's just allowing yourself to get to a state of being frustrated and pissed off because then it spills over into everything you kind of think about, everything that secretly you've been like, nah, it's all right. Yeah, nah, it's okay the way it is. Yeah, I can let it be. And all of a sudden you're like, fuck that shit. And you have a totally different reaction to it because you're tense. Frankly, you're tense and you're frustrated. And so there's an element of self-reflection there, but you miss that if you're just determined to find something to blame your anger on. You miss that if you try to find something to go, this is why I'm frustrated, and once this is fixed, then it's all going to be better, and all that. But if you can catch yourself, if you can just stop and go, all right, I'm just pissed off right now. And that's skewing everything I do. Like there might be an ounce of truth behind the things that I'm thinking. There might be some things that have been not sitting well with me, right? But in a minor way. I know my anger is amplifying it. I know my anger is magnifying it, making it bigger, making it seem bigger than it is because I'm agitated. In the same way that when you're like hot and uncomfortable, every little touch, every little thing, just you're just kind of like, it bothers you, you
Yeah.
know? And that's it. It's to recognize that when you're agitated, just recognize you're agitated. At least then you're like, all right, I'm making it worse than it is. And if you can just admit that, it's not like the problems go away. It's not like the perceptions or the things that you're looking at go away, but at least the reaction to them subsides. At least your immediate knee jerk response to them is now questionable rather than apparently rational because it's never really rational. You're just agitated. So it seems to make sense because it alleviates your agitation, or at least it seems to, right? And so that's kind of the point is just recognize it. Recognize it. Recognize all the little things that you are acknowledging agitate you. And then calm down. Calm down. And then address them. Address them. That's the nice thing about that. It's not that there was a wasted time there. It's not that you are doing something wrong by experiencing anger and frustration. But once you exercise that anger and frustration, once you act on it without calming down first, then you're going to create chaos for yourself. You're going to miss the lessons entirely. And now you're going to have something totally new to learn about anger itself, about frustration itself. So you can shortcut all that and learn that lesson right now. It's happening when it's happening. You are accountable for it, and it skews everything that you do. Just calm down. Calm down, learn from the experience. And then when you're calm, Make changes in your day to day life as the things that were agitating you pop up. Let's say it's something about work or something about a relationship. And in that moment of frustration, you're like, you know what? I'm tired of taking that person's shit. Or, you know what? I am tired of my cubicle being in that side of the room, like whatever it might be. Okay. And so when you're calm, next time it comes up, and you're like, I'd actually really prefer for that to not be the case. And you can say it calmly. You can open the conversation in a way where you're not like, you know what? I'm fucking sick. And you can really just calm it down and actually have an influence in your life, and to make all of that frustration and anger worthwhile without it being the driving force of your action. It can inform your action, and it can inform empathy because you can recognize what a lot of other people are going through.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's almost like you can take all of the, because it's a lot of energy, right? Like anger is, there's a lot of energy in anger and frustration. You can almost like, I don't know, filter it and understand that there's only one, like one thing you can do at a time. And as much as it can inform actions, like doing things while you're in those intense emotions, like angry, frustrated, you know, worried, afraid, the more extreme things, as opposed to, I don't know, a little bit more balanced, a little bit more calm. There's going to be different reactions to things. There's going to be, you can almost expand, the chaos, make it worse, or understand that, like, you're the root of it. You're in the middle of it. And I had a morning a couple days ago that just got overwhelmed with a lot of different things going on. I mean, that's can be a consistent in some ways, like just the swells of things that can hit you all at once, and all of a sudden it's like you notice a number of things in your life, and you're like, oh my god, all of these things are going on right now. All of these things are happening right now, but there's still only one thing you can do in response to them at a time. And especially when it's, understanding that they don't mean they don't mean something about you, but they're still on you. There's still a lot of times things that happen because of the way that you've been approaching things, because of what you've been focusing on. And so there's a fundamental shift that can happen, where it's, you understand that it doesn't mean something about you, like with, money, for example. If you start to, you realize and you start panicking, like, oh, gotta make more money, have more money, whatever it is. And understanding that it doesn't, like, how much you have doesn't mean something about you, can at least clarify, you know, what you can do right now. Because it's still, as much as, you can have these massive swells and all of these things going on in your life at once, like, the moment that you're in is still the moment that you're in. Like, it's still one thing.
Mhm.
But taking a good look at your response to things is vital. And I think that side of responsibility, where it's like, oh, these are all of these things. It's not my, it's not, it's not like a fault thing, but like, there's a side of it that it can be. There are certain things that can be that, and like,
Well, being responsible doesn't mean beating yourself up, and I
Yeah.
think,
because beating
when
yourself up is
if you're talking about
irresponsibility
and if you're
in a
talking
lot of
about
ways
fault,
too.
you're metaphorically beating someone up when you don't need to, like
Yeah.
being responsible is, paying attention. It's developing sensitivity. It is, creating space where maybe there's currently tension, and when we're acknowledging the moments, the mornings where we're like, you know what, I am just not loving what's happening right now. That's how I've been describing it to myself. It's like, because I used to say, I I hate this. I don't like this. And now I'm just like, I'm really not loving this, but it's what's happening, and I think I'm phrasing it in that way because I'm not trying to turn the moment into the enemy. I'm not trying to turn myself into the enemy. I'm not trying to turn other people in this moment into the enemy, because there is no war to fight. There is no enemy to slay. There is attention and there is tension, and they sound like I almost said the same word, but I didn't say attention. I said attention. But we think, that we're trying to, by beating ourselves up, that's a part of taking accountability. And I used to think the same, but it's not needed. You're not changing the past by telling yourself right now that you're a piece of shit. You're not changing the future by telling yourself right now that you're doing something wrong. Those things aren't actually changing anything, but it certainly can feel like it's necessary, but it's really not.
There's also the implication with the word fault that you could have done it differently, right? Like it was almost a lapse in judgment as opposed to wherever you were at the time in your life. And that's hard because accountability and fault are very different. Accountability is recognizing that you made that ripple. Fault is thinking that if you were a better person, you wouldn't have.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, that person doesn't exist. It's another one of those fictions. Like the idea of you that could have made that different decision in that moment is a fiction.
Right. And
It's a fiction. It didn't happen.
mhm.
And so you have to just recognize, well, shit, that's what happened.
Mhm.
That's what I did. Not that's what I did because, but that's what I did. And then move on. And you can still feel, what people will call guilt. I would like to look at those emotions and remove the label and then just look at the experience as it's happening. Like when you feel guilt, what you're really doing is you're just going through a bunch of shit where you just really recognize the impact. Like that's what it is. You're like, oh, fuck. And you recognize what it would have felt like for you.
Mhm.
But then instead of actually just feeling that and going through the thoughts that go with that, we go, I'm a piece of shit. And it immediately swings our direction right back to us.
Mhm.
Yep.
All of a sudden, our focus went from the learning
From
Mhm.
the
from our
impact.
impact
Mhm.
to I'm a piece of shit. And
Right.
it's like a defense mechanism. It's like
Mhm.
a way of holding off the lesson because it hurts. We don't like it. Like, this is why in Discover Transcendence, I talk about cognitive dissonance, right? Because that discomfort at, oh, I've really shit the bed.
Mhm.
You know, no, no, I'm a piece of shit. I'm a piece of shit. I can deal with that. I can just beat myself up now. All of a sudden, it's you're not looking at it at all, and it really is just important to just fucking feel it. In the same way I was saying at the beginning of this, just feel your frustration. Just feel whatever it is you're feeling and stop making it about you. Because the making it about you, or the rather making it into a narrative about a fictional you, is a way of escaping the feeling and the thoughts that go with it. Because that's informative. But if you make it about you, now all of a sudden you have a whole other spectrum of shit to deal with. Now you're the problem. Now there's a whole emotional roller coaster that goes with trying to fix the problem, with trying to fix you, right? With judging you and all of that instead of just sitting through it and maybe crying, you know, maybe just sitting there and just fucking like there's and even that, like within reason, I think to a degree, like it's funny when Celeste, when my daughter was younger, there was this parent group and they were advocating for like pillow screaming. They'd be like, when your child's just throwing a tantrum, just tell them to take the pillow and scream into it for as loud as they can. Let them get that emotion out. And my whole thing was, and what is that teaching them? Like what is
Thinking
that
that
teaching
fixes
them?
it.
Like if you want to scream, fucking scream out loud. If you're really going to give in to the urge to make this into a full-bodied scream, scream out loud. Accept the impact it's going to have, and then watch as people go, "What the fuck was that all about?" Like, deal with it. Like, just deal with it. And in doing so, you're going to recognize that other people aren't screaming about their shit. But if you hide in your room and scream in your pillow, you're going to start convincing yourself everyone's doing that, or that they should, or that they need to. And all of a sudden, there comes this whole fucking story, about you needing to scream in a pillow so you can feel better, right? And it's all about you. It's insidious because it's well intentioned. That is the issue with the idea of us, is that we genuinely think it's gonna help. We think we're helping. We think we're helping ourselves and the world by thinking about ourselves and trying to make ourselves better instead of actually paying attention to the experience we're having. We think we're helping. And it's uncomfortable for us to recognize that we're not. It's uncomfortable for us to recognize that what we're feeling right now is actually the best thing that we could be doing for ourselves, is to just feel it and move on with your life. What needs to happen next? Maybe you're like, well, nothing. Good. Sit. Enjoy the episode. Maybe you're like, well, shit, actually, I'm running a bit late. I shouldn't be listening to this episode right now. All right, so stop. And that's okay, because there's nothing you truly have to do. If you're a little frustrated about having to stop the episode, feel frustrated about it because you're pointing out your attachments, right? Like that's the whole point. Like, everything about the experience you're having is informative if you just realize how much it's teaching you about the story you tell yourself. That's really it. Because that's it. Like, it's informing you about the story you have attached to. That's what your emotions are doing.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can recognize that, well, then you can start to recognize where it's worth it sometimes or it's not. Like, I'll give you an example and then I'll stop rambling. um, as a parent, as your child grows and develops, they go through a lot of different things. They go through a lot of different perceptions of themselves. They go through a lot of different emotions. And as such, they're not always sensitive to other people. Sometimes they can be just straight up mean without knowing that they're being mean. It's a necessary part of what they're going through. But as a parent, it hurts, right? There's a part of it that you're just like, ouch. And then there's the immediate temptation to make it about you. And that is the biggest danger in being a parent, is to go, oh, obviously that means I'm a bad parent. I'm a bad person. I'm not teaching them right. I'm not blah, 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 and measuring yourself up to anything, just straight up measuring yourself up instead of just going, right, they're learning. And then do the same yourself. Learn from that hurt, because the hurt often comes from needing to see or needing to see parenthood a certain way. We really do want to oversimplify things. It's like, oh, being a parent just means being there for my kid. It's like, what does that mean? Because that's an infinite fucking spectrum. Sometimes being there for your kid means not giving them what they want. Sometimes it means helping them accomplish their dreams. You know, there's no simple answer. There's no simple anything. You really just have to feel out life one moment at a time and trust in yourself.
Absolutely. And I think, yeah, 'cause sometimes I'll go back and forth with, as you notice things that you've done, in the past and not beating yourself up, looking at them, feeling, the emotions that go with those things, and, the balance between looking at it for what it is and assuming that it's something that you have to hold on to as opposed to learn from, and notice when, maybe there's things you've done in the past that were empathetic expressions and then certain things that weren't very empathetic expressions. And so learning from them as opposed to attaching to them or allowing those experiences to solidify you in a certain way, and like finding that sort of balance between things, between experiences that you've gone through, and not assuming that it's like then something you have to attach to in a specific way, I guess, or like assume that it makes you now that person, that acts that way, that isn't as empathetic. And so that balance of learning from things and recognizing like what informed certain actions versus letting go of holding on to those things and assuming that you have to, you know, carry that with you, like looking at where it came from and then letting go of the feeling of need, like it's now a new thing that you have to hold on to, and like letting it, letting that go too. Because having certain stories about yourself, or attaching to past actions, feel like can be just as detrimental as assuming that you've ever been something specific. But I think that's a part of the fluidity of things that, I don't know, can feel tough to navigate sometimes. But it's still like, I don't know, it's still something that you just have to reconcile within yourself. Like there's still no one to look to, or a right answer, or like someone else to tell you what to do ever. It's like it's always on you, being honest with yourself and allowing certain actions to inform future actions, without so much self-judgment, because again, that doesn't do anything. It just kind of keeps you spinning, or it's like the rocking chair. It does something and goes nowhere.
I just want to add before I pass it to Amanda. Apologies, because I know you're going with something there. The most honest thing that you could say in all of what you just said was it's tough to navigate. That it's a fucking complex experience, and that you should never make it overly simple, because that's the danger.
You don't need to know. You don't need to have that false certainty. And as much as it feels like you need to have an answer as to like what is the right thing, it's like regardless of what you choose, you're going to have an impact on people. And sometimes it's going to appear like that impact is positive, and sometimes it's going to appear like that impact is negative, but it's a combination. It's both and neither. Like when we're feeling frustrated, it's like, yes, maybe someone is not being considerate of you to some degree, but it's also you're bothered about something that may not matter. And both of those things could be just as likely, and both are probably true. And so it is very much a both and neither. Where we're thinking, I need to know. It's like, you haven't known this whole time. And yet I have had some of the most amazing experiences, and I've had some experiences that like I really didn't love. But there's an appreciation for those moments where I was crying on the floor and feeling entirely alone and feeling like there was nothing, there was no point, feeling so confused, so frustrated. And yet I appreciate those moments so much. Not so much during, but very much so after. Because it's adding to the depth. And we're talking about like over complicating things or oversimplifying things, and it's like, to some degree, existence is very simple. It is here, it is happening. That's about as simple as I can get, if in terms of just like what is. We complicate things because we think that, it couldn't be that simple. It couldn't just be things are happening and that's about it,
Feel them happening. Pay attention.
right, like things are happening, pay attention. Like it really is, on one level it is that simple, and on another level it feels like you are bouncing between different roles, but you're not those roles.
No.
You're not just those roles. You're not just the parent, you're not just the kid, you're not just the friend, you're not, and we say just, and it's like, what does that even, it's like that's a whole other side conversation, but it's just the role is there, and there's more than just the role. The space around the role, there's more than just that. There's so much more, and something that seems to be a lesson, is that for me, that's one of the big lessons that I feel like I'm learning right now, is that there's so much more than I think. There's so much more than it appears. There's so much more than I am expecting, and I can keep going, and there's so much more to the experience of me. There's so much more, and yet we zoom in on one small assumption. And we were talking about just how we'll how we're gonna think about, what was it, it was like we were jumping to something, and it's like you make an assumption, and we have our attention, or I think it was being accountable and having faults, and fault is based on that assumption. And the holding yourself accountable, or being accountable, is accepting that you're not always going to love the choices that you make. You're not always going to pay attention to every consideration. You're not always going to know what consideration to make, but you're accountable for the fact that you're doing the best that you can. And you accept that the best that you can is not always going to agree with your opinion of what the best is. But the faults and the beating ourselves up and all of that is all just based on the assumption that you can know, that there is some kind of guarantee, that there is control. But it just doesn't seem like you would want to fault yourself or fault anyone else, because truly we are doing our best. And you know that's just included in all that's happening.
Yeah. It's interesting because there's a feeling that goes with what we're saying. As you were saying earlier, it seems rather simple. Just feel what's happening, pay attention. And then on the other hand, I've talked about enthusiasm previously, and I've said, it's very much about being willing to be a participant in what's happening.
Hmm.
There's a willingness to just shed that I guess cloak of assumption and identity, to just shed all of that thought and just go, fuck it, I'm here, I'm going to pay attention to what's happening, and what's next.
The assumption
you know
safety blanket.
you just let it all go. It very much is just like kind of rising from a swamp that you've been sitting in because it felt warm and comfortable, and you just get out of it, and now you've got the opportunity to fucking live life. But
Hmm.
there's a choice that goes with that, and the choice is frankly to just get over your shit. It really is to get over your shit, which is not to solve anything. It's to stop taking yourself so goddamn seriously.
Hmm.
Stop taking yourself so goddamn seriously. I mean, it may sound difficult, but that's because you're taking yourself seriously. You see, that's the whole thing. You're like, well, I can't just stop taking I have trauma. I have shit. It's like, yeah, you do. But you don't need to make that sound like it's the fucking curse of your life.
You're not doomed.
You don't need to perceive it as being something that's stronger than you.
Hmm.
And even if you're looking at it, well, I'm stronger than it, but it's a battle, you can take that weight away. You really can, by acknowledging that the story you tell yourself about anything other than the experience you're having right now, even the story you tell yourself about what you experience you're having right now, isn't life.
Hmm.
Life is what's happening now. And if you deal with that, if you suffer from trauma, and I say this as somebody who does, you know, all the time, like I'm hypersensitive to everything, to touch, to conversations, to sound, to everything. And it just comes down to feeling that, being accountable for it, recognizing that it has deep roots, sure, but that I'm stronger than them. And it's not an immediate silver bullet, but over years of practice, eventually you just stop rising to the fear because you allow yourself to recognize and feel the fear. You allow yourself to even recognize where some of the fear comes from. And it's not ever one thing. Be careful not to ever settle on one thing because you'll realize as you get older, it's a lot of things, including just fear itself. Right? Allow yourself time. Stop trying to get somewhere. Just be the change that you are. Because in that change is growth. In the experience you're having now is growth. And I always find that fascinating because so my daughter is learning to drive, and so recently I introduced her to the television show, which is no longer on anymore, but you can find it online, Canada's Worst Driver. Now, if you haven't watched this show, I highly encourage you to go and check it out. Shout out to Andrew Younghusband, who's the dopest MC and host of the show. Anyway, the point is, Canada's Worst Driver selects a number of people who have been nominated by their friends and family members as the worst drivers in all of Canada and runs them through, I think it's like 8 weeks or something of driver training. And in each week selects the person who's done the best to leave the show, and then they narrow it down. Almost without exception, everyone's issue in driving is that they're not paying attention. Like where they're not just being an ass on the road, like or they're overly hesitant because they lack confidence. But it's always thinking about themselves instead of
Mhm.
thinking about the driving.
Mhm.
One lesson that is repeatedly mentioned to people is look farther down the road. Take in more of your environment.
Mhm.
Stop being so afraid because there's an attitude that comes to with driving, right? What's that attitude? I can handle this. I'm going to pay attention to what the fuck is happening.
Mhm.
I'm going to be responsible as I'm doing it. I'm
Mhm.
not going to go and overextend my attention by starting to do my nails or eat something while I'm driving,
Mhm.
because that would be a cost to my attention. So we know that when it comes to driving, we understand that there is an ideal mentality where you are the safest and most effective driver that you can be when you're not taking yourself too seriously, but you're paying attention to what you're doing, right? When you're taking yourself seriously enough that you are being responsible for everything that you do on the road, but you don't assume nobody else is there and making choices on their own, right? You're aware of everybody influencing everyone else,
Mhm.
right? That's life. Welcome to driving the vehicle of your body. That really is it because it's just attention. Pay attention. And what you'll find is nothing has to be within your control, but you can still go in a direction. That doesn't mean that the road is going to be what you imagine it will be. Could
Mhm.
you imagine that you leave your house, you're like, all right, I'm going to drive here. You go down the road, there's a detour, so you just get pissed off. You just pull over and start throwing a shit fit, or you start crying. Oh my God, the road's not going where I wanted it to. And they're directing me, and I don't have any choice. And like, there's all kinds of stuff where you could just,
Doesn't do much.
just see where it goes. Pay attention,
Mhm.
you know, and that's it. Just stop thinking that the life has to be what you think it is. Stop thinking you have to be what you think you are, and just pay attention moment to moment.
Yeah, and there can feel like a lot of things that can can distract you, and like thoughts about yourself, and that's a big one. Identity, that cloak, that weight can feel like, when there are detours, like you start thinking about yourself, then it's going to be a lot tougher. It's like, no, that doesn't align with how you see yourself or how you want to see yourself. And then it's going to be tougher to just be like, oh, like a detour isn't really a detour. It's just a different shaped road. It's not like, it's not the road that was existing. A detour is just a shift in
Mhm.
direction, in change, and like getting frustrated about that change doesn't actually help with the change or the turn or the shift.
Mhm.
And so it's just like, how fluid are you going to be with your experience? And paying attention, like as simple as it sounds, it's like paying attention to the moment. There can be, yeah, it can feel like there's a lot in the way of
Hmm.
that, or like a lot distracting you. And a lot of that is, you know, what you, how you think about yourself, the
But
narrative you
it's
tell yourself,
informing you too,
for sure.
right?
Yeah.
Like that's kind of the point. Like I'll go through, I don't know, a dozen different scenarios about, shit that could be happening in my life, or things that I have done that may have impacted people differently. The reality is that I don't know any of them,
Hmm.
but even going through, I'll just create a hypothetical, right? So we recently went and hung out. Actually, this isn't even a hypothetical. This is perfect. Okay. So we recently went and hung out with a bunch of people here in town, and they were having a conversation about someone who had passed on. And I had made a joke based on that person's previous employment that didn't ring. And somebody went, well, that would be really rude, and the joke didn't come across. Now I could have, you know, went out of my way over the days after that to go, shit, I should go apologize to that person. Despite, again, they didn't know this person. They were talking about somebody in the sports world that was not a personal friend or anything like that. But I didn't know that at the time. Right. And so I went through, I don't know, like a half dozen different things, like shit, maybe these people are kind of pissed at me now. Maybe I've come across like kind of douche. And so instead of going, and obviously that's what happened, obviously that's the case. I went through it. I kind of felt like a heel, and then went, I don't know. So I'll log this in the back. It's now a consideration because it's crossed my mind. And so the very next time I went and hung out there, that person came up again. And so this time I asked, do you know this person? And they're like, well, no, not personally. And I'm like, okay. Well, like, because at that point, it's like, even if I did say something that may have come across as insensitive, it wasn't too close to home.
Hmm.
It wasn't like a relative. It wasn't somebody like, so immediately I'm like, all right, fair. So it's kind of okay if it did come across as kind of a dickish
Mhm.
comment. Like, it wasn't meant to be. Again, I thought it was damn funny,
Hmm.
right? But even if it were to be looked at as insensitive, that's something I'd be like, yeah, I can explain that. You want to talk about it? But it's because I went through the thought process of, oh shit, maybe I did say something fucking worse. Maybe I did have that impact, that I suddenly had a new appreciation for everybody who was involved as a human being with feelings,
Hmm.
even if those feelings weren't actually in reality, even if they weren't feeling that way. All of a sudden I've acknowledged that these people have more depth than the
Hmm.
simplistic fucking view of them that I have.
Yeah.
Right? All of a sudden I acknowledge they could be pissed off, or they could be sad, or they could be fucking, resentful, or they could be fucking happy, or they could be any of those things. All of the thoughts I have about people and how they could possibly perceive me are informing me that these are fucking people.
Hmm.
It's informing me that I don't know, but that all of these considerations are worthy of merit. They're worthy of taking in, because it teaches you to tread softly. It teaches you to actually pay attention and not get caught up in things,
Hmm.
because any of these things could be happening in real time. And although I thought about it after the fact, I could have been thinking about it as it came out of my mouth. And that's not to say I should have, but now I've changed. Now my actions are going to be different going forward. Maybe next time I'll say, is this someone we personally know, before I make a joke?
Hmm.
Mhm. Yeah.
Right. And that's not to say I've done something wrong, but I can see how that would lead to a different kind of ripple. I
Mhm.
could see it for me and everybody else. See?
Hmm.
So it's not about not having the thoughts. I think that that's the danger, is that, we suffer so much through the thoughts that we start to think that the Shangri La of all of this is to get out of the thoughts rather than to use them, to actually be informed by them, to not limit ourselves to certain thoughts, to open ourselves up to
Hmm.
every thought, and to do so without judgment of the thought, or without being in danger that those thoughts are real, because they're all just perceptions and assumptions until something happens.
Hmm.
See, it wasn't until I actually got back to the conversation where I could ask, do you know that person? And I knew I'd never answer what happened until I got there. So I wasn't torturing myself about it.
Hmm.
I'm like, well, when I get there, I'll deal with it. And this is what I mean. Like, my intentions aren't to do harm. That doesn't mean I don't.
Hmm.
And I'm more than happy if somebody comes up and says, hey, you just did something that kind of to talk about it. But I'm not going to think too much about it until that happens. I'm going to consider everything I can, and I'm not going to judge myself for not being able to consider more, because it's only through more experience and open conversation and open communication that I can learn more, that I can consider more. So it's never about me. It's always just about living here and knowing that you're already doing the best you can.
Yeah. Yeah. That, I mean, there's so much futility in wondering, spinning in your head after you do something, after you say something insensitive, after you do something that maybe you wished you hadn't in the moment. It's like, well, it happened, and it does, because those things, usually the ones that sting, are the most informative. They're the most informative moving forward, and they're the ones that you know kind of shake you enough to be like, oh yeah, no, that is something to pay attention to. I wasn't, seeing everyone as fully as I could have been in that moment. And moving forward, like, if you like, beating yourself up afterwards, again, is that kind of it cuts down the ability to be attentive
Well, and it's in
the
what
next
you
time
just said
around.
there. I wasn't paying as much attention as I could have been. No, you were, but that doesn't mean you're paying all the attention that there is to pay. See, there's a difference. It's like, well, I could have been. No, you couldn't have. You couldn't have been doing better. Okay. And it's through looking at it that way that you're avoiding the lessons that will help you do quote unquote better.
Hmm.
Right. You can't go back and change what you've done. Accept that, because then you'll learn from what you've done. But as long as you go, oh, I could have done better, then you're never actually looking at what was happening. You never look at what was done and why you did it, because you're too busy looking at the better self that would have never done it. It's just like, I don't want to deal with life. Let me tell myself a story, and that's very much it. That's what we do, right? So just beware that it's not that you could have paid more attention. It's that you can pay more attention
Hmm.
now. Now you can pay more attention. Now you can recognize that that person has more nuance, more depth. Now you can recognize you have more nuance, more depth. Now you can do it. Not any other time. Not in the future, not in the past. Now. This is when all of your lessons really apply. Now I can pay attention to the ground beneath my feet. Now I can pay attention to what this person is saying without paying attention to what it means about me, or making assumptions about how they see me, or my assumptions about where this is going, or our relationship, or anything. Now I can apply this. That's the only time.
Because yeah, the regrets is like, it's like driving a car, looking back, looking in the rear view mirror, and that doesn't help moving forward at all. So it can be informative, but to pay attention to it doesn't doesn't help the shifts, doesn't help the changes, to make turns moving forward. To look back doesn't do anything, but to look back and see that, like, you know yeah, taking accountability for those things and not passing it off to something else, and taking accountability and responsibility for everything that you've done is what informs the moment to moment change. And it's like, that's, yeah, and that's what you can do. It's like, that's the option. There's not really, it's not that there's not much else, but it does inform how you continue to live your life, like where you continue to focus your attention, and how you continue to look at things, and see the world not through, yeah, not through the same filter of yourself. Because, like, looking through a filter of yourself, then that's where the conflict arises with certain things. The thought that, could have paid more attention, should have paid more attention. And like, wherever you were at, like, that was the degree, whatever you were looking through, whatever sense of yourself you were looking through, like, that was probably the amount of attention you were paying to a lot of things in your life based on, actions that you took. And a lot of times noticing that is what informs how much attention you pay next moving forward. And yeah, but reconciling with regret and guilt and all of that, like focusing too much on it doesn't help at all. Like it really doesn't inform much. It's like you can't feel super guilty and learn as much. Like you got to let go of that feeling to learn, or let go of the focus on it, or the shoulda coulda woulda.
Well, otherwise,
sort
how
of
can
thing.
you apply being present if you're still looking at the past?
Yeah, you can't do both. You can't have it both ways. So you just have to, yeah, keep moving forward and take responsibility and accountability, and yeah, continue to do your best and pay the attention that informed, the decisions that you make, and using those things to pay more attention, those experiences. Like, oh, that was a lot. And again, it's not a lack of attention, because that implies that there's like some spectrum of attention too. Like you were at 70% attention. It's like there was full attention there, but it was what it was being informed by. Like you always have 100% attention. It's just like, where are you
Putting it.
divvying that out? Are you divvying it out to the moment fully that you're experiencing, giving that 100% attention, or are you filtering it through? Are you giving some attention to how you see yourself, how you want to see yourself, how you should be acting, the right thing to do, and all those things like that filters out your attention in different ways, but that attention is always full. There is no 50% attention or 70% attention. There can be that to, towards a certain situation, but yeah, the attention's always there. It's just, where is it focused? And if it's, you know, focused on yourself in a lot of ways, and being something and trying to get somewhere, and focusing on something, like that's going to inform maybe, saying something less sensitive to your environment is informed by how much attention you're paying to yourself, like fully on yourself, and what you think is best for you, as opposed to taking in more considerations, looking past just what you think is best for you, and seeing that isn't a necessary focus so much, and using those experiences to understand that isn't it doesn't help to focus on yourself. Like, it doesn't help your experience so much, but it can feel like it does to focus on yourself. It can be like yeah, like a feeling that feels right, but it doesn't actually do much at all.
It's usually the shit you regret. That's the stuff when you're focusing on yourself. That's
Mhm.
the stuff later on. You're like, fuck. And you regret it. And that's the funniest part, is that's the circular loop. I'm not as close to the mic. That's the circular loop, is that you're making it about yourself. You're not paying attention. You fucking break something, so to speak. And then later on, you make it about yourself and beating yourself up for it, where you were once again not paying attention. So now what do you think is going to happen? You can break something else. And that's the vicious loop, is that eventually you got to stop making it about you and just pay attention. You got to learn the lesson. Fuck, I broke something because I wasn't paying attention.
And yeah, and so you just gotta, it's like that's when you realize, oh, you can let yourself go in a sense, or at least drop that focus, or that divvying out that attention to that focus. But you can't keep making it about you to reconcile with times that you've made it about you. Yeah, you gotta move. Moving on doesn't mean like you moving on. It's like
Mhm.
just moving on, moving forward.
Yeah. 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 Just um, it's it doesn't it doesn't deliver. I used to describe things as working versus not working, and focusing on myself just doesn't work. And it's like, no, it works. It works incredibly well. It just doesn't deliver on what it says, on what it promises, which is the control and the certainty and the satisfaction. And it just doesn't deliver on those promises, but it certainly delivers on making it a short-sighted tunnel vision. So it's like being in an incredibly short tunnel, and it's so dark that you can't see that it's so dark because it's closed off. There is no opening at the end. It's just a dead end. But we've called that dead end a tunnel. And we called it a tunnel because it's so dark that we're like, there must be an opening. It's just so dark I can't see it. It's like, no, a dead end works exactly the way a dead end is intended. It goes nowhere. But we would be more receptive if we could admit that we aren't so sure. And we do. It just happens in waves, and the pendulum swings, and you make an assumption because it's almost a default setting. And it takes some reps to make to potentially make new default settings.
And realize that you don't know everything. As much as you can feel like you can think about a lot, like you don't know. You don't know. You don't know what someone else is thinking, what what the fullness of their experience is like, but you know, being sensitive to that, knowing that, not knowing what it is, but knowing that it's there, that it exists in the same way that your experience exists, like how many things you go through in a day, ups and downs, like that will inform the next things that you do. But if you're looking at that through some, you know, that it can feel like a weight, the weight of how you think about yourself, your identity. It's like where this, the fundamentals of this podcast are letting go of how you think about yourself, how you see yourself, all of the titles that you throw at yourself. It's like that's going to distract you. There's a lot of attention that can be given to, being a certain type of person, living a certain type of way, acting a certain type of way. And those are the things that get in the way. Like those are the things that, we talk about insecurities and stuff. Like so much of insecurity stems from having some solidified perspective of yourself.
Hmm.
Like when there isn't such a solidified perspective, those insecurities, like insecurity stems from there. It's like, am I fitting into this solidified perspective that I built over time? Because if that isn't always the focus moment to moment, like, oh, I should be acting this way, I should be doing this thing, there isn't so much lack of alignment to that thing. You don't veer from that as much because there's no middle point so much that you're extended from when you
Exactly.
act differently, or when you change, or when you act in certain ways that are not as sensitive, and you assumed you were sensitive, and you're like, oh, that's not me. And it's like, but it is. It was. It doesn't define you right now, but it still was fully you
Yeah.
in that moment.
Yeah. Well, and that's it, is to look at all the. This is why people are informative, because when you look at people, you're really seeing what's capable for you or what's possible for you. Right? Like when you see somebody hurting someone else, that's in you. Don't convince yourself it's not. I've said it previously. That's one of the things that nobody likes looking at in terms of like World War II and Nazi Germany, is that not everybody was an evil Nazi. Like the German people weren't evil. They just got really caught up in thinking about themselves, and that's something that we're all capable of, right? And that's probably the most uncomfortable thing. when you look back at atrocities throughout history is, oh shit, those are people just like us who
Mhm.
just got really caught up in certain things, certain thoughts, certain behaviors, like it's important to recognize that, because if you can recognize the full spectrum of what you could be, from the monster to the hero, well then you're just informing everything that you do,
Mhm.
and a lot of empathy as a whole. I wanted to swing this around because I know, um, Friday we tried to record the season finale of season 6. So I wanted to swing this back to that conversation, because so much of what we're talking about here has been what we've been applying throughout season 6 and throughout the podcast, which has been just pay attention, do the best you can, keep moving forward. And that's not always easy, but it is life in a nutshell. And over the last season, we've had a lot of ups and downs. Um, the season, was it the premiere, the first episode of the season,
Mm-hmm.
was it kind of I would say a high point for the podcast, in that we were at the Netherlands, but on the same token, kind of a mixed day slash experience when we recorded it, because there was a lot of ups and downs in
Mhm.
that 9 day experience. There was a lot of stuff that we were dealing with in ourselves. And so, as with every retreat, it's not, we got this, let's do this. It's step by step, moment by moment, day by day, just adapting, just moving forward. And then at the end, going, hey, that was actually pretty good. But the more you make it about yourself, the harder the retreats experiences are. And over the next 10 months, now we are here at the end of season 6, it's just been a lot more of that. Like, we've had some partnerships with people that have fallen apart. We've had some partnerships with people that have grown. We've seen some friends of the community go away. We've actually had to tell some friends no more. And on the other hand, we've welcomed new people into our lives, new people into our business. We've welcomed new people in, not only to Dualistic Unity, the podcast, but now we have a karaoke wing, which is very cool, right? Where we're integrating more with the community. We're working with Fidelium. We're doing a bunch of very cool things. But all of that required us to look at ourselves, look at all the possibilities of how we could see ourselves, and then
Mhm.
to move forward. Like with the loss of one of our co-hosts,
Yeah.
all of us went through the same almost grieving and mourning process, where we kind of all thought, shit, was it something I did? Was there something I could have done about that? And we reconciled that. We learned from that. We're applying that to everything that we do moving forward, working with whoever, recognizing that, there are different ways to communicate. Maybe there are, certain conversations you don't want to have. Maybe you don't want to, I guess, share the whole vision as we did with what we're doing, at the risk of I guess overwhelming the people that you're working with. In the same way that, when I first started working with Andrew, it was like, well, I can't hit him over the head with everything that's involved in this conversation. He's going to run screaming for the hills. And so we learned that over the last season as well, that while we have plans, while we have a grand kind of, not vision, but rather a lack of ceiling for everything that we could do with Dualistic Unity, it's important to remember that not everybody wants to look at that. They get overwhelmed by stuff like that, in the same way that we can kind of get overwhelmed by just how many fucking things you could perceive here and now. And so that's changed things. We've learned things from that. And so I just wanted to say that over the last season, and I think we can all admit this from how weathered we feel internally. It really has been, that you you just keep moving forward. You keep moving forward, you feel what you're feeling, you learn as best you can, and try not to get too caught up in thinking that you can do better, thinking that you know what that is. Try not to get too caught up in yourself. Just keep moving forward. And before you know it, you're coming to the end of a season, going into an entirely new season. Everything changes once again based on the lessons that you've learned, which you could have never known were coming. So you can't think forward too much either. Just trust that you will learn everything that you can from every experience that you have if you just pay attention.
Yeah, because you start looking forward too much, and you're not going to be able to see everything going on in the moment, or even looking outside of like the room that we're in right now. Start thinking about all that, because that, as much as you can think about past and future, like all of that is kind of the same sort of thing, and that's where a lot of our thoughts stem from. So yeah, I mean, the the journey of season 6 has been all over. I mean, you could have never predicted, I don't think, majority of the things that and how things have gone, and yet it's all been super informative. There's been certainly not a lack of experiences, that's for sure, and that's what you learn from. That's the opportunity of life, is to have a lot of different experiences. Some things that you really enjoy and appreciate, some things you don't enjoy as much and don't appreciate as much, but they're all informative. And looking at them and being honest about them and responsible for them, and continuing to move through your life, like they can be informative as long as you keep going with things, because otherwise they can just kind of keep you stuck, stagnant, like not experiencing as much, not continuing to experience as much, because life can be a very, it can be a very fluid, kind of free flowing experience, or it can be, the same thing every single day. And like, just the ability to keep going when it's not the same thing every single day. It's like that attention becomes that much more vital. The ability to pay all of your attention to the moment, to the experience that you're having, is most vital, without so much of you in the way, your assumptions, your expectations, your certainly your beliefs and thoughts about certain things. So yeah, you go through things, and you learn you learn a lot. And through it all, it's like you notice when you took yourself really seriously, and then you notice how little that did for you. And to continue to do that, it's like, that's what definition of insanity: keep doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. So that yeah, you get a good look at that as you keep doing the same sort of things and feeling the same sort of ways, but understanding that it doesn't get you the thing that you assumed it was going to, or maybe the thing you assumed you wanted to happen. Like, that's never going to be the case. And so just continuing on is not just continuing on, but doing that without making so many assumptions about how you're doing allows that process to keep playing out and keep happening a little bit more seamlessly. But yeah, you can learn a lot from life and experiences as you go through them. And yeah, season 6 has been no lack in that. That's for sure. Um, so,
Hmm.
yeah.
I mean, we're always learning in the same way that we talked about, there you're always paying attention just to what? To reality or to the thoughts about reality. Are you paying attention to what's happening or what you think should be, could be, would be happening if only you had gotten your way, and I liked Ray, that you had brought up Canada's Worst Driver, because there's a particular character on there, or a person that's on there, who was an aggressive driver. And for the most part, I'll summarize, he was taking things personally on the road because he thought that people were out to get him. And so, because he thought that everybody was out to get him, he thought then during this driving instruction, experience, he learns that, he has the realization that he is the driver that he avoids. He is the driver that he hates because he's getting them first. Well, now he's the person that's doing the getting, who's going after people. He's the driver he complains about. and that hit him. And so, he took that in, and it didn't look like he, beat himself up too much, because he realized that, he didn't have to be on defense, because there really was no one on offense. And that empathy, that lesson came from seeing that, you have become that which you hate. And I think that's a meme somehow. I feel like that just came back to me. And it's true. A lot of the times, we are the person who is not thinking or considering other people, because we assume that someone is doing that to us already. And I think that's where a lot of empathy can come from, is just seeing that, you may be the source of that tension, of that conflict, and it just feels easier to say that it's coming from somewhere else. But every, it's safe to see that other people do that as well. And so they're on defense for an offense that doesn't exist, in the same way that we are on defense for an offense that doesn't exist. And then in that, there's space, and you're like, okay, so there's no need to be on defense. But I think you see that you can have that whole realization without beating yourself up for being on defense, because you're like, I just made an assumption. And that's okay. It's, where did that come from? And in that person gave himself space, and all of a sudden didn't feel that big desire to aggressively get someone else on the road, because that person had the skill set to be on the road, to pay attention to things that were happening down the road, to pay attention to the car itself. You're paying attention to the speed, to the amount of gas in the car. You're paying attention to being in the car, as well as paying attention to what's happening in front of you, behind you. You have all the skills, you have all the potential, all the ability. All of that is there all the time. And when we're not doing that, it's like, okay, well, where's that coming from? Some assumption. And when you're letting go of one assumption, there's usually another one that you didn't realize you were still holding on to. And so the process of learning deepens, and it doesn't have to really be too much more than that.
Yeah. And anybody who's wondering, season one of Canada's Worst Driver is what we're referring to. Shout out, Bob. Um, what I enjoyed was that he learned something from recognizing that other people might be acting like he's acting, but then it was through exposure to other drivers, to actually being in a community of other drivers and seeing them go through the same things that he was going through, that he recognized there's a wide spectrum of drivers. Like, the other insight that he had was not just that he's the only person on the road that he's dealing with, but that there are other people who are just straight up bad drivers, that
Hmm.
he's not recognizing that there's people out there that are suffering from a deficit of skill or experience,
Yep.
that it's not personal at all, right? And that in thinking about yourself, you really start to get a tunnel vision about people. You really start to think that they're all considering you,
Hmm.
instead of desperately trying to get through their own life,
Yeah.
right? And that's, I think, one of the most useful things that we can go through is, again, the spectrum of considerations, right? It really is a bonus to our life, and yet we look at it like it's a curse.
Like a burden.
Absolutely. Oh my
Oh.
God, all these intrusive thoughts are telling you a lot of information you'd be that would happen if you made that impact, if you were to do that thing or say
Hmm.
that thing, or like all of a sudden you're learning, you're like, you don't like how those intrusive thoughts feel. Good, that means you're not going to do the thing
Hmm.
unless you beat yourself up for having the intrusive thoughts, and then you're not going to learn from them. You're going to block them out, and oh, you're going to end up doing them, which
Mhm.
is the funniest fucking thing when you get it, when you realize that it's through avoiding the shit that makes you uncomfortable that you do more shit that makes you uncomfortable
Yeah.
later on. It is crazy. It's like you spread a discomfort ripple. It's just, but all you have to do is just not get too caught up in yourself. Calm down. Just calm down, and carry on.
Don't tell me to calm down.
Exactly. I am calm. No, no. But it really is that. And so
That
I know we're
self-honesty.
coming up to the end of our episode here. And we had, like I said, we had recorded an episode on Friday that was meant to be the finale. And so I'm just glad that we're coming back to this conversation, because we have about 3 minutes left. And I think season 6 really has come down to application, which is a big part of how the podcast is shifting now. The description of the podcast has changed. The category of the podcast has changed. We are no
Hmm.
longer in religion and spirituality. We are now in
Health and wellness
health and
Health and
wellness and leisure,
wellness,
and
leisure,
leisure.
I
Yeah.
believe, right?
and
And philosophy, society
okay.
and philosophy.
Yep. As well.
So the leaning there, you'll notice, is very much the application side. Leisure, especially, I love that. Relax,
Mhm.
and then health kind of goes with health. It goes with relaxing and paying attention. So a
Right.
lot of what we're talking about here is the application. It's kind of like you were saying earlier, like that's what this has all been about. Looking at those insecurities and letting them go. It's like as a means of living. Like
Mhm.
that's not really
Yeah,
what it's about so much as that's a pathway that's available to us,
awesome.
taking advantage of. We look at all these thoughts about us and we assume, shit, I have to be mired in them, rather than to step back and see all of them and be informed by their spectrum,
Hmm.
right? Informed by the possibilities rather than assuming certainty
Mhm.
ever. And suddenly we grow and we become more nuanced and our relationships change because, again, just accepting that you might have hurt somebody's feelings, just looking at it as a valid possibility, not only allows you to address that, but makes you more aware of their feelings.
Mhm.
It makes you more aware of their humanity. It makes you more aware that they can feel shit like you do. There is a value to those thoughts until you make it about you. God,
Yeah.
I gotta avoid doing that. Stop doing that. You're missing the lesson,
Mhm.
right? Because that's what it is. It's not about you going, and from now on, I'll never do that and make another hollow promise,
Hmm.
Mhm.
right? Because you're just trying to avoid learning the lesson by taking the easy way out. Yep, got it. It's just like a kid saying, I know, because admitting I don't is damned uncomfortable.
Right. And it's like, if you did know, that's so much worse. So you're telling
Because
me that you did know to be considerate and you actively chose not to. That's great. I thank you so much, Billy. Instead of
yeah,
admitting I didn't know. And you know what? Thank you for the reminder. Yeah, I really do appreciate reminders more and more because it takes the pressure off having to remember everything all the time in every moment.
yeah, because you you thought you knew in the moment that you did something, and then it's like, so did you know, or do you know now? But yeah, there's so much of what you were saying before with, and I think we're pretty close to time,
Yeah.
but like, yeah, you don't know what someone else is going through, but knowing that they're going through things and understanding that you don't, and you can't really change anyone else. You can only change yourself. You can only shift yourself. You can't, control how things go outside of yourself. You can only be sensitive in yourself, and continue to take in those considerations, and
Hmm.
yeah, understand that life isn't always, easy or comfortable or, basic or simple. It actually never is, quite frankly. And that whole idea that it is easy or comfortable is part of that illusion that we can control our way to an ease. But there can be a fluidity when you're not putting yourself in the way so much, or assuming so many things outside of yourself. Like, those judgments, those thoughts, those assumptions, they're coming from you. That fear of judgment is judgmental.
Yeah. But life is also potential.
Yeah.
And as much as we can focus on the lessons and what we've learned in considerations, let's remind ourselves that every moment is full of nothing but infinite potential and every possibility is open to you. So let's move forward.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
And just as a final thought, assuming that the audio for this episode has worked out, I think this would be a fantastic finale to season 6. So if you're listening to this right now, you've just witnessed a spontaneous end to season 6, which I think is probably the most appropriate end to season 6. Um, this has been fantastic. Season 7's right around the corner. We've got a bunch of new stuff coming, and it really just does come down to keep moving forward.
Yeah.
If there's anything I've learned, it's just keep moving forward. Keep moving forward and stop thinking you know anything other than what you can learn right now and stop making it about you. If it's about you learning it, you're not really learning it.
Hmm. Thanks for
Yeah,
joining, everyone.
appreciate it. And yeah, we'll talk to you soon. Bye, everyone.
Bye.